ask the questions. What is God? What am I? What's the purpose of life? Why am I on earth? Where's heaven? Where's hell? And what's the one true religion? And I got all the answers. I woke up in the center, in the core, in the very essence of Source, and realized I'm Source. I did this to myself. I chose this for myself. I picked Nanci myself. I was never alone, never unwanted, never cut off. Somebody ought to tell those people down on earth that it's not what religions teach us. It's completely different.
Still have questions after watching these videos? Perfect. Come hang out with me on Wake Up Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern, where we will answer your questions live. And you never know what surprise guests might show up. Thank you for watching. My guest today is Nanci Danison, who had a near-death experience, and we are going to hear all about it today. So Nanci, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Well, I think it's incredible that you've had 6 experiences, but really the core one was the first one that you had that opened you up to all of this. So why don't we start there, and I'm going to let you just share your experience in any way that makes sense for you to share it.
Okay, I'm going to give a very short version because, as I indicated before, it would take me 8 hours to explain the whole thing. I died the first time on March 14th, 1994, in a cancer hospital, all alone, surrounded by hundreds of people outside my room. I was in a mammography room getting what's called a needle localization procedure. That's a procedure that a radiologist does in order to mark where in the breast the tumors are. Ladies, get your mammograms. There are types of breast cancer that if you wait until you feel a lump, you're going to be dead. But you can pick up the microcalcifications on mammogram. So get your mammograms. And that's why I was in the hospital, because mammogram had picked up 3 tumors in my right breast. And the radiologist's job was to stick a wire, stick a needle with a big wire inside it into the center of the 3 tumors. And she was having a hard time getting the center. And the process is you get squished down in the mammogram machine, and then she takes you out and puts the needle in and squishes. So I went through the squishing 8 times. We had to do the whole procedure twice. She pulled the needle out once and started all over again. It took about an hour, 15 minutes. And unbeknownst to me, I'm allergic to local anesthetic. And I kept telling her that I was sick, that I was nauseous and sweaty, and my heart was beating too fast. And she kept ignoring me. So when she finally got the needle where she wanted it, and pulled it out and left the wire there, the radiologist and the technician left the room and left me alone. And I'm sitting there trying very hard to slow my heart rate down. And, I'm breathing and, and finally it rested. What I didn't know is it stopped. I just knew it wasn't beating so hard anymore. And I got out of my body. But the first thing I thought was, oh, this is cool. I didn't know you could do that. And then I went into blackness that was comforting. It felt like, I've heard NDEers call it velvety or, but anyway, it was a comfortable blackness. And off in the distance, I saw this little tiny spot of light. And I said to myself, oh, I know what that is. I'm supposed to go into the light. And the minute I thought that, the light came flowing into me. And I spent a long time in the light trying to make a diagnosis, because I did not for 1 second lose consciousness. And so I was like thinking, well, am I breathing? No. Is my heart beating? No. But I could see, and I thought I could hear, but there wasn't anything to hear. So I was going through what doctors call a review of systems to see what was working and what wasn't. And this love was just flooding me. I mean, it was billowing through me and out the back of me and back through me. And I was sending it back to where it was coming from. And I felt like all my molecules had just been separated, and this love was just filling me. But at the same time, I miss human life. Not in a way that I wanted to go back to it, but I I miss chocolate. I miss, and I made a vow after this that I would eat as much chocolate as I could without getting myself sick. I miss sun on my face, the wind through my hair. But I didn't know I died. I just was hanging out in this space where I was filled with love. And then I started getting what I call knowings, information just flying into my mind. And knowings are unlike human life. It's not where you learn something. Knowing is where the information is deposited directly into your mind with a level of understanding that is complete. It's source's own level of understanding. And it's with a sensation that it's firsthand personal experience. You actually lived it. So I was getting in like, I don't know, hundreds of things into my mind like this. And while I was like trying to figure out what all was working and what wasn't, I noticed I could see through the back of my head. And so I looked down and I saw the body sitting in the mammography room, just sitting in the chair with their arms on the arms of the chair and the wire hanging out. And I didn't recognize her. And then when I finally figured out it had to be me because of the location, I said to myself, huh, I don't know what all that vanity was about. You don't look like much now. So that's when I finally realized I must be dead, because I could see that the body was down in the mammography room and I'm in the light, and I knew I was alive, and I knew I was in the light. I had no doubt about that. And right about that time, I when I realized I was dead, I said to myself, well, I've heard it described as going through a tunnel into the light, and I didn't go through any tunnel. And all of a sudden, I'm in this dirt and stone narrow tunnel that I think was for a railroad trestle. And I could smell the dirt and the mold and the grasses around it. I could feel the weight of the humidity on my skin. I could feel my feet on the ground. But I knew it wasn't real because I knew I was in the light. And I said to myself, well, this isn't fooling me, but I'm going to do an experiment. So I tried again. I thought, well, I've heard it described as a beautiful meadow. And I was thinking of the movie, oh, shoot, What Dreams May Come, where Robin Williams was running through a field of painted flowers. But anyway, so I was picturing that. And all of a sudden I'm in a meadow with, beautiful flowers and gorgeous sunlight and butterflies and birds chirping, but I knew it wasn't real. So I said, okay, I'm going to try one more time. And I said, I'm in the hospital and I'm on my way over to surgery. Boom, I'm walking down the hospital corridor with a nurse beside me on my way to surgery. I could see the purple stripe that, it's this way to surgery. I could smell the hospital smells. I could smell the nurse's perfume. I could feel my feet on the floor. It was absolutely real. All three of them were absolutely real. And that's how I learned about manifesting. And I learned that we souls literally create the physical reality experiences that our bodies have while we're in them. And I also learned that, when NDEers see, beautiful scenery or whatever they see in the afterlife, those are manifestations as well. Those aren't real. They're just, and source, and I learned later by this huge download of knowing that source has made the process as comfortable as possible for somebody who's going through a traumatic event like death from human life. And so each person is given exactly what they need. at the right time to help them, calm down and be comfortable with the experience, as comfortable as you can be. After I had these 3 manifestations, I was like looking around, and all of a sudden I saw 5 lights arrayed kind of like in a, semicircle. And I said to myself, oh, this is a typical Danison moment. I'm supposed to go into the light and I get 5 lights. Which one am I supposed to pick? And a voice, not my own, came into my mind and said, it doesn't matter, just pick one. And then the 5 lights, which had been turned on their side, and there were different shades of colors that cannot be seen in human light. But I knew the names of the colors while I was there in a language that it can't be spoken by humans because the vocal cords won't go there. The 5 lights turned into 5 light beings, and I recognized them as my most beloved, dearest, eternal friends from all eternity. None of them had been in human life with me, and they were sending me messages telepathically, like, "How'd it go? Tell us everything." It was like they'd been on an island in the Pacific, and a new movie just hit the beach. They wanted to see the whole thing, so they wanted to see my life review. So I had a life review with 4 of them on the outside watching and 1 on the inside with me. And I found out later that the one on the inside was the rest of me, the part that did not incarnate into Nanci, the part that stayed in the afterlife during this incarnation. And so I started watching my life review, and I don't remember much about it other than it wasn't scenes of events that happened in my life. It was more like sensory data that I had collected. Like I saw every sky that I'd ever seen in my life. I saw all those again, and I recognized, where they were from. Like, these are skies from laying out in the yard and getting, sunburn. These are skies from out, through the windscreen of my little airplane as I was flying, and then pretty soon I realized, been there, done that. So I didn't watch my life review anymore because I was getting back all these memories of other physical lifetimes I had lived throughout the universe. I mean, just hundreds or thousands of them all at the same time. And I remembered every single moment of them. And I remember thinking, how could I possibly have ever thought I was this little human named Nanci when I had done all this living? And I remembered every single moment of every single one of those lifetimes. The strange thing is, I remember alien lifetimes. I don't remember any of the others being human. I I don't know if I just didn't remember more. I thought the more interesting ones were the ones where, like, my favorite was I was a nebula, and I remembered, some of that. Um, but after the multiple life review, things kind of faded into the background, and I started getting knowings again because nothing in the afterlife was what I expected. And I realized if I focused my attention, I could get answers to questions. So I asked the questions: what is God? What am I? What's the purpose of life? Why am I on earth? Where's heaven? Where's hell? And what's the one true religion? And I got all the answers. And that's primarily what's in my books. And I was angry, Laurie. I felt like I had been lied to my whole life by my Roman Catholic religion and by my parents and the priests and everybody else associated with it. Because life is so simple and beautiful and powerful. And here I was taught all these fairy tales, a lot of which originated in, the Middle Ages, when people believed in a lot of kind of magic and all kinds of stuff. And I was beside myself with anger. And then I thought, how can you be angry in heaven? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But I did have all my human emotions as well as all the emotions of a spiritual being. But I think in response to my being angry, I was shown a complete history of Earth. I watched its origination all the way through its destruction, and the the documentary was focused on religion and how it developed and why it developed and how it changed over time. And that kind of answered my questions about, how I came to be, a Roman Catholic and why I had those beliefs, and that it was perfectly normal and natural for a human to have beliefs like that. After I watched and calmed down the documentary, I was back with my Five Light Being friends, and they told me we're going forward into the rest of us. And you have to be able to merge your energy completely into the energy of others in order to do this. And we know you aren't good at that. So they put me through training, and they taught me how to merge my energy into one of their entities, like beingness, personality, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. But I merged into one of them. And while I was in there, I could see little segments of physical lifetimes that they had lived, none of which had been with me. And then I learned how to merge into two of them at the same time. And I could bounce in and out between feeling like I was Nanci, living their lives, watching from inside their eyes, or I could feel like I was them living their life. I mean, I could feel like I was a completely different person living their lives. So I finally got to the point where I could merge into all five of them at once. And we went forward into the core of Source. And I learned that Source is, for lack of a better analogy, similar to the sun. It's an energy source made completely of energy. And when we souls, or even while we're in human bodies, feel that energy, we call it love. So that's the love that floods NDEers when they're in the afterlife. It's just the fact that they're closer to the core of Source. So it's like, the closer you get to the sun, in theory, I mean, I know this isn't the way the sun works in physical reality, but in theory, the more love you feel. And then Source throws off these coronas, like the sunfall throws off coronas of more intense energy. So I was going through these layers of more intense energy, during one of which I watched the entire creation of the universe. And I came to know that the universe resides in Source's own mind. We are all in Source's own mind. We haven't gone anywhere. That Source sent out this bolus of energy that eventually evolved. That's not a good word because it means so many different things for different people, but it eventually coalesced into planets and stars, and Source imposed these various laws that we call physical laws or scientific laws, gravity, molecular cohesion, the laws of chemistry, physics, biology, all those things. There's no law of attraction created by Source. Just had to throw that in there because I was learning again about manifesting. I got this huge download of knowings about manifesting, and that this is manifesting, that Source manifested the universe and keeps it within its thoughts. And then Source created what, for lack of a better term, the closest I can come is like dream characters, and created these mental characters. I guess it's sort of like an author of novels creates characters for the novels and keeps all the novel characters within its own mind. And that's what Source does. Source created all these unique individual mental characters, gave them specific personality traits, some of which are like Source, some of which are completely different. They're things that Source can imagine but can't actually experience directly. And then gave those characters the ability to put some of their energy into physical matter. That's what we call incarnation. So part of us stays in the light and part of us incarnates. And the part that incarnates is, when we're in human life, we call it a human inside an animal body. The human is an animal. All we do is inhabit it as a soul. And then I watched the rest of creation and I saw the future and I saw, what happens to Earth again. But the long and the short of this whole experience of going through these corona layers of source's energy was I woke up in the center, in the core, in the very essence of source and realized I'm source. I did this to myself. I chose this for myself. I picked Nanci myself. I was never alone, never unwanted, never cut off. There were always at least two of us, me and my body. But then there's the rest of us, because source is composed of zillions and zillions of these little personalities that we call souls. And once I realized that, the experience kind of stopped, because I had been saying all along, like when I was getting the knowings and when I was watching the documentary of human religions and when I was watching creation and everything else, I kept saying in the back of my mind, somebody ought to tell those people. Somebody ought to tell those people down on earth that it's not what religions teach us. It's completely different. And the next thing I know, I'm in a whirlwind coming back to Nanci's body, screaming, I didn't mean me. Somebody's got to tell those people, but I didn't mean me. And when I realized I was going back to the body, my light being friends were like hanging around me saying, love is all that matters. Love is all that truly matters. And I was saying, shut up. I'm trying to memorize the stuff. And I tried to memorize as much as I could of what had happened to me and what I had learned. And when I eventually got back down to Nanci's body, I wouldn't go in. And I mean, I don't know what forced me in, but it was gross. She was cold and wet and heavy. It felt like clay. And I felt like going into a dead body. And it was so gross. And I fought it every inch of the way. And I could feel the freedom of being a spirit leaching away. I could feel all the stuff that I'd memorized leaching away. I could feel that I was inside the head looking out through eyes that weren't my own. I could feel like I was inside the head hearing through these like megaphones or something. I wasn't all the way in the body. But by this time, the radiologist and the radiology technician had come back into the room and they were gone for half an hour. So I was dead about a half an hour. And I said, I passed out. And they turned around and looked at me and said, do you know who you are? And I went, oh yeah, I know who I am. And
you don't know who I am, but I do.
I know who I am. And the doctor said, do you know who I am? And I said, you look familiar, but I can't place you. She was not only my radiologist, she was a client. So I knew her as a client. But at that point, they realized that something had happened and they yelled out in the hallway for a nurse to come in. A nurse came in and took my blood pressure. And I think somebody was hooking me up to an IV. But my first blood pressure reading, which they did not record in my medical record, was 60 over PALP. Normal's 120 over 80. Mine was 60 over. I could feel it, but it doesn't register on the blood pressure cuff. It's that low. And took I think it took an hour for me to get back to normal. I'd have my blood pressure come up to normal. So that's my first death and return. It turned out that if I had had this surgery like 2 months previously, I would have been diagnosed as having stage 1 lobular and ductal carcinoma. But pathologists had just changed their classification system. And by the time I got my pathology results, I was under the new system, and they call it atypical lobular inductal hyperplasia. So that's my big NDE.
Okay, so Nanci, first of all, for everybody watching, we're about to go into a PhD conversation here. We're going to go super deep. Would you, would this sound weird to you if I said to you that you are an actual manifestation of questions that I didn't understand because I understand what I am as source, but there are life things. And since that journey 2 weeks ago, I keep on saying, I need to talk to somebody who understands the life experience. And here you are. Would that make sense to you?
Oh, yes. We do manifest
I know.
opportunities, and I mean, obviously you didn't create me, but you manifested the
No.
opportunity to talk with me.
Well, and at the timing, because listen, I don't reach out to my guests. I only knew a little bit about your experience. Sometimes I get a chance because I have a corporate job to fully listen to somebody's experience, and sometimes I'm directed not to. I don't understand why, but because I didn't hear this already, I kept getting waves of goosebumps throughout your story, like waves of them. And you saw me reacting to things that you were saying because you were on single screen. Like, I am so excited about this conversation we're about to have because the first thing I want to ask you is for you to explain when you've been everything and you expanded into what you truly are, to come back into the human life. Could you even refer to yourself as, I mean, when this happened to me, I could only refer to myself for a long time, like in the third person. I didn't feel like I was me anymore. It changed the game. And did you have that kind of similar experience where you're like, you almost want to talk about yourself as somebody else?
In fact, I do. I talk about Nanci. There's Nanci, and then there's me.
Yeah,
And
not the same.
it's a really difficult thing for me after well, after I came back, was I knew it was Nanci and me, but she knew it too. And she knew I could die and leave her. And she's been scared to death I'm going to do that. Of course, I've died 5 more times, which didn't help her level of panic and paranoia. But it's been very difficult for me to reassure her. And in fact, the last time I died, I told her when I came back, I will never leave you again until you are ready to go.
And the you, because this is all of us that are watching, there is a you that is having this human experience, and then
Bye.
there is the real soul you. So will you kind of explain in the best way? I know these things are so lacking in human language, but so that people who are, I mean, these are really new concepts to people, especially if they've been mired down in religious concepts that these do not fit into them. We've been taught that there is a source, a God, and it is completely outside of us, and that we are its children, and it is our Father, and that's not how it works. So, as best you can to help people maybe who are kind of new to this understand it, can you explain that a little bit more and elaborate?
Sure, but first I want to note that I've done research for 30 years and published this book behind me, 33 Souls Who Met God. Through the course of doing this, I was looking for people like me, people who had gone all the way and awakened to the knowledge that they are source. And it took me 30 years to find them, but only 1.7%, according to the 2000 cases I reviewed, actually get as far as I did and as the other 32 souls did. So you cannot fault an NDEer for coming back with different messages because they just didn't get far enough. And 99% of NDEers come back with the same or very similar religious beliefs that they had before, or human beliefs that they had before, because they just didn't get far enough. So that's why my story is so different from everybody else's. I've forgotten the question.
That's okay. Explain how we can be this human avatar experience compared to the source of all that is.
Okay, my understanding, and I got a huge download of knowings about humans and our spiritual self and the traits that have in common, which are not very many, and their differences and why it is the way it is, and what it's all about. So that's like the biggest area of knowledge that I received while I was in the afterlife. My understanding from that is that human animals populate the earth, just like dogs and cats and horses and pigs and cows. And we can incarnate into any of them, or into rocks, or into trees, or anything else. We are source, putting ourselves into an animal. So the human's not a manifestation of the soul. It's not an avatar. It's not a character. It's an animal. And I have seen coaching clients that I have treat their dogs better than they treat their own bodies. This is a beloved animal that gave up her life so that I could have this experience. And she's done it, over and over again. So, please love your bodies. They are as precious as your children and as your pets. Who you are, the personality that you have, the person that you think of as yourself, the identity, the individuality, that's all source. It's one of these mental characters within source's mind that has decided to incarnate into this particular human animal. We have eternal personalities, so we're the same person. That's one of the things that some afterlife experiencers comment on, and NDEers as well, is I'm still me. They get out of body, they go, I'm still me. That's a surprise, but that's because we are eternal and we have the same personality and traits no matter what we incarnate into. We just may not have the ability to express them all. Like, I don't know many rocks that can sing, but that's really, to me, the big difference. And that's why I talk about Nanci and her needs and her wants and her life, and me.
Absolutely. So, how can you describe to people who are watching the energy that really exists when we are not human? Like, not just the love, but the wisdom and the power and the all of it, that's the energy that's out there. So, we have this experience right now. But it is, like you said, when you realized when you saw the light beings that you were just a fraction of that higher light being. So can you describe like the energy that we truly are when we're, not having the human experience? When we expand back to like I'll call it the higher self, just for a lack of better words.
Okay, I think I use terms differently.
That's okay. Go ahead. Use them whatever you want to use.
Source is energy. It's the only energy that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Source manifests physical matter, like our bodies. So, and we, the souls within the bodies, are source's own consciousness and self-awareness. So I don't think of any of that as being energy more than anything else is energy. The body is a manifestation of source energy. We are source itself and our source energy. Um, did I answer your question?
I guess I'm trying to help people understand the nuance of difference between the source energy and what we experience when we come here. Like the magnificence and the power, because you did experience what it's like to be source. Is there a way that you can explain in words what that's like?
Um, it's like coming out of a deep sleep into awareness of who you really are. It's like coming out of anesthesia back to awareness. All intelligence, all awareness, all consciousness, all knowledge, all wisdom, all love, all emotions, all everything belongs to source. There's no separation. And that's the biggest fallacy in human beliefs, is this idea you mentioned earlier about, God is out there and is separate from us and we are his children. Well, that makes sense to primitive humans. And that's where those beliefs originated. Primitive humans who had no idea whatsoever what the reality was, but they needed a way to understand, life. I don't think there is really any way to explain what it's like to be source other than just waking up to everything, to who you really are. And you can't, to the best of my understanding from being within source, you can't really get there while you're in a body.
That's kind of the part that I was looking for, because that's, I think, the hardest part of these experiences. Like, they change who you are when you understand these things. They change how you navigate your life, because you understand a huge amount of energy and love that we truly are. So when you experience that and then you come back and you're human again, how did you begin to live your life differently with this knowledge?
Okay, well, it took me about 2 years to stop wanting to go home all the time. I mean, I wasn't suicidal or anything like that, but I just wanted to go back home all the time. The purpose of being in human life is to be a human. I mean, that's source incarnates into various types of physical matter to experience what is it like. And so to me, like, people ask me, well, how do I feel that source love, or how do I get in touch with my source, essence? You're not supposed to. You do that at home. You do have an eternal lifetime of doing that. When you're in a body, when you're in an incarnation, your job, your goal is to experience that life, that body's life. And so I would say, if you want to live your purpose, if you want to reach your goals, live like a human, live like the best version of a human you can be, because we souls can take control of these bodies and make them behave. Because if you don't take control and make them behave, they will act just like animals, which is what we're seeing in the world today. Everybody's just acting like a wild animal. But find the joy in human life. Find the love in human life. Love yourself, love other humans. Be happy. I mean, Source's purpose for incarnating is to find the joy and the love in other ways than what it's used to. So I would basically say give up on trying to be source or feel source or connect with source, or all those things that people crave because they want the bliss. You can't get there from here. You can't get there from inside a human body. The one thing that is absolutely true about getting into the afterlife is you have to die, because it's a process that source designed for souls who are dying, and to get them out of an incarnation. At least that's the way I understand it.
So when you were having that experience and you were in that light body experience and doing the life review, and then at some point you said you looked down and you could see yourself in that hospital room, it didn't sound like you went anywhere. You just changed an energy, a frequency, a dimension. So, can you explain where the other side is and how that part works?
Yeah, the other side doesn't exist. There's no different frequency, dimension, any of that stuff. What my understanding is of Source's mind is that it is capable of multiple simultaneous levels of awareness. I experienced that too while I was in the afterlife the first time. It's impossible for humans to do that. But everything transpires within Source's mind. The closest I can come to an analogy is dreaming. Like when we're dreaming, and by the way, dreaming is a soul function. The body does not dream. When we're dreaming, we create an environment. Source's environment is the universe. We create characters. Source's characters are all the animals and creatures and things throughout the universe. We put our perspective into the dream. We're in the dream as a character, watching the dream just the same way we're in a body watching, human life from inside the body. Source does the same thing, puts itself, its awareness, its perspective into each thing that it incarnates into, and watches life from inside that perspective. When we wake up from a dream, all that's still in there. Those dream characters don't go anywhere. They don't get out of your mind and go anywhere. We souls do not get out of Source's mind and go anywhere. So there's no returning to the afterlife. There's no going home. I mean, it feels like going home because um, of the amount of love that you feel and the familiarity of it. But the afterlife is not a place. It's a state of awareness, a state of existence. And some people who've reached that state before can go back multiple times. And in addition to being dead 6 times, I've had what I call pop-ins, into the afterlife. But it's more like waking up. Like some people can lucid dream. It's maybe a little bit more like waking up and lucid dreaming when you're in the afterlife. I don't really know. There's Source and the afterlife are so completely foreign to human life that it's really hard to explain what it's like. You had to have been there.
Yeah, I agree. The way that I think I've kind of found a few things that help explain, I call it a hyper awareness. As soon as you think that this is an awareness because you're here and you're having this life, as soon as you become the source, you have a hyper awareness that is beyond description. It's so hyper real that coming back here seems just like a foggy version of what that is. And I think that that's one of the biggest differences that I experienced.
And that happens as well with any kind of experience where you're on the or in the process of crossing over. Like you can get out of body and not really have any kind of spiritual experience. But if you are dying and you start on the path back to, awareness of being source, you experience things that are way more real than human life.
Like you talked about with the colors and stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of people who just gotten part way through the process or actually gone into the light and actually gone into the afterlife, they will all tell you it was way, 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 way more real than anything you can experience in human life. So that's kind of the way I see the hyper awareness that you're talking about. And when you wake up to the knowledge that you are source, you have all of its thoughts, all of the thoughts and the lives of all the bazillions of other characters within its mind, all of the knowledge, all of the experience. it's a type of awakening and awareness that is impossible to even imagine when we're in this little teeny tiny smidgen of a speck of existence.
And especially because we say knowledge, but knowledge isn't the knowledge like human knowledge. It's not like, oh, I understand quantum physics or I understand how the body works down to the cellular level. It's knowledge beyond knowledge, beyond knowledge and wisdom. It's not quantifiable. And so, would you agree with that?
I have, yes, but I would say it's both. You, I have read near-death experience accounts where, um, like some of the 33 souls in my book actually did get everything there is to know about quantum physics or about math or about English or about, human type subjects. But more than that, and I think this is where you're going, it's eternal knowledge. It's the knowledge of what source is, who we are, how we relate to one another, what the energy field that I call source is in terms of, its relationship to the universe, being within its mind. It's source's knowledge of itself and of what it's doing and what its goals and purposes are.
So when we talk about these things, I think people who haven't had these experiences have a really hard time understanding and relating because there's a part that says in the human experience, okay, I'm this. I understand that there's only one thing, but how can they both be true? But yet you had this cool experience. And I think that this is a kind of the midway point that might help people to understand a little bit of the progression of how it works, where you saw those five eternal souls. So obviously, in that experience, you are source, but you're not at the base level of source because you realize you're this higher self with these four other light beings and you're having all of these experiences and experiencing all their lifetimes. Ultimately, when you really get back to, I guess, the truth of the reality of everything, you're only one thing, but you have that experience. And then we also have the earth experience. So, will you explain to people how they can all be true? Because I think that this is the part that people really struggle with.
Well, they are all true. And my understanding from getting knowings and also living this, I mean, I did this myself while I was in the afterlife, is what I call the multiple simultaneous levels of awareness. Source is capable of living a bazillion lives, what we call lives, physical lives, all at the same time, and keeping every single moment within its mind and memory. Um, Fortunately, when we incarnate, and I don't know if this is true of all incarnations or just humans, we are blanketed with this cloak of amnesia so that we have, this bottom level of awareness where we're limited to what we learn and experience during this particular lifetime. We don't have the memories of previous lifetimes. We don't have the memories of source. We don't have anything to work with. We come into the body as a blank slate and start accumulating experience and thoughts and beliefs as soon as we enter as, the zygote, the dividing zygote, and become, a human. And people enter into, or souls, we souls enter into humans at various different stages in development. So you can't say, a 10-week-old fetus is alive and has a soul. We don't know. But when we get into the afterlife, we jump to a higher level of awareness and understanding, and we can look back at human life and realize it was a game or a play or a role that we were in, and appreciate it from that standpoint. But no, it wasn't real. It wasn't true. It wasn't who we really are. But my understanding is that those souls that are in the incarnation phase, that go back to the afterlife for a bit while they're still in the incarnation phase, they don't know their source. So if you think you're communicating with a soul in the afterlife, they're not going to be able to give you the truth because they don't have it. They are not aware enough. It's only once you get back all the way to source, the core, the essence, the center of source, and wake up to the knowledge that you are source, that you're at the highest level, and you can look back on what's going on in various stages of the afterlife and what's going on in human life. And you can see the various different perspectives and the various different levels of awareness and the differences in knowledge that each has. And that's why I think, not to brag, but because these are 33 souls who met God, who had similar experiences to mine. They all learned the source is an energy. It's composed of bazillions of individual personalities, and that we are source. They all learned that. They got to that knowledge in different ways, but each one of those 33 souls is able to look back at what other NDEers went through and go, oh yeah, I remember that. They can look back on human life and say, oh yeah, I did that. It wasn't real. It's a level of perspective that only the 33 souls. Well, I found two more since then, thanks to your channel. But it's all true, all at the same time. It's just a matter of focus. And right now, our job is to focus on human life.
Okay, so if our job is to focus on human life, are we here for the experience? Some people say we're here for growth, but on a level of source, to me, in my experience, there was nothing that source was lacking, needed. It was everything. As soon as something was created, it knew everything about that creation. However, the fun part to me was veiling to almost see if it could wake up and have this experience. Is that kind of the purpose of what you've understood it is here, or is it different than that?
I think that's a pretty good summary. My understanding as source and as looking back at creation and the creation of souls and setting up the incarnation process was that, yes, the only purpose of incarnating is to have experiences, whatever they may be.
Good, bad, ugly, right?
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's just to have experiences. Now, we also come with, I'll call it a purpose for lack of a better word. Um, there are three different purposes that generally, if we're coming into a human, that we choose among. One is to be a support person for another soul. You may incarnate with another soul, and maybe they're new at it, and maybe you're not. And so you decide to incarnate with them so that you can be a support while they're acclimating to human life. And you will come into the body of somebody who would be likely to be a support person, a spouse, a parent, a rabbi, a friend, just somebody that a human would normally turn to for support. You may be a catalyst, uh, and your sole goal might be just to be in the right place at the right time to do the right thing that's going to change somebody else's life. And that's part of what I see you doing with your channel is, you're the catalyst for so much change and growth and awakening among souls. But most people have the purpose of, or most souls have the purpose of just experiencing a particular feature of physical life that source cannot experience directly. So source cannot be greedy. So we may choose to experience greed through every single creature throughout the universe that can feel greed, so that we get a 360-degree perspective on what it's like. And you may incarnate over and over and over and over and over and over just to study greed. And it could be anything, it's not love. Our purpose is not to learn love. Source is love. You
Right.
know,
It's a state of being of love. It's
yeah,
not, we love here, but it's a state of being of love.
yeah. And so it can't be its purpose to learn what it already is and already knows. Um, and and the purpose is not to learn lessons that are important to human life because we won't remember them. Once the body dies, the next body isn't going to have those lessons. And we're going to have that same amnesia. So we're not going to remember them to be able to carry them into another lifetime. And we don't need them in the afterlife. I mean, it doesn't matter what we learn about how well to navigate human life because we're not human in the afterlife. So we don't care. Um, I don't know, does that kind of answer your
That's
question?
fantastic. Okay, obviously, we always have a hard time with loss because we are emotionally connected and it's natural to miss somebody when they're not here. But on a soul level, a soul can never be harmed, and time isn't what we think it is anyway. So, are there, in your opinion, souls that are here just to experience life for certain fractions of it? Like, for example, a baby might come in to feel love from the mother, and that was, or have some certain experience. That's all it wanted. Or maybe that person, that mother needed to have that loss so that they would have certain other experiences later because of that. So there's an interconnectedness and an intertwining in all of the lives that's in a perfection that we might, from a human aspect, look at it negatively. But even knowing that, it still doesn't take away the grief that we feel sometimes at these losses. So, what can you say to help people who are trying to navigate that part of the human experience? Because that's a tough one.
What I generally tell people is that because we are bilocated, we're in the afterlife, and only part of us is in human life. We're still with all of our loved ones. We can feel them, talk to them, love them all the time while in the afterlife because they're still there and we're still there. It's only that little part that was in the human body. So it's the body that grieves the loss, but we souls also grieve the loss because we believe we are the body. So I think if you can hang on to the fact that you're still with your loved ones in the afterlife and you can pray to them, I think that's the best way to navigate grief, which I'm doing right now, is you could communicate with them. I mean, from the body to them in the afterlife. And just sometimes you'll recognize answers. Sometimes you won't. I'll tell you a real quickie. My sister died a year ago. And shortly after she died, I started praying to her or, just talking to her, asking her stuff. And one night I felt this body behind me in the bed and I rolled over and it was my sister. And I said, "You're not supposed to be here." And so she goes, "Oh, okay." And then she left. And then she came back and she crawled under the covers and she goes, "I am supposed to be here with you." So that was her little way of trying to comfort me because I talked to her, because I prayed to her. And you can get instances like that if you open yourself up to just continuing to love and continuing to try to communicate with the people that you've lost.
Beautiful. I'm so glad you shared that. It made me
Oh, I
have
know.
tears in my eyes when you said it. So, a lot of people here as we're navigating all of this, they'll say things like, we are one. And we understand that a little bit different way. But I think when people say it, they're kind of like, well, we're all one, like, oh, we're all one human species because they still see themselves as separate. But you had that amazing experience where your soul family was asking you to actually merge into and to see that we were one. So that merging, that experience must have been super important for you to have to bring back. So, what do we need to know, the people who are watching, about this oneness, about this connection, about how we treat others?
Well, first, let me say that there were maybe two or three other of the 33 souls in my book that had a similar experience of, merging into somebody else's energy. I think if you can remember it, and I've got a little sticker on my computer right here. It says Heather, because I think Heather did the best job of explaining in her NDE account how to keep the oneness alive. If you can separate out the body and just be yourself, you might have to do that through meditation, or you need to find some quiet time where you can, be objective about your body and try to get more in touch with yourself as soul. But I think if you can it might be easier to see the oneness when you're in that state, because it's clear that humans are separate beings. That's why we believe in separation. That's why we believe in a separate God. That's why we believe in, you know, you're not able to merge into each other. We're not all one. I mean, it's just that's the physical human experience. But if you can read near-death experience accounts, and I think that they are so valuable in this regard, to understand that we are just source. The part of us that's real, the true personality, is source, and there's only one of it, and everything exists within it. That's the only real oneness that exists. And I honestly don't know if you can get there from human life if you haven't had, an NDE type of experience, because it's so foreign to what humans experience.
But I think by saying these things over and over again and having these conversations, I think people start to understand, at least maybe intellectually or emotionally, that what you are doing to somebody else, in a very literal sense, you are doing to yourself.
Yes, and the but is, it doesn't really matter from a spiritual standpoint. You suffer the consequences of your behavior while you're in physical life, and you will suffer them again during your life review,
Mm-hmm.
because if you get far enough into the afterlife and have your life review there, you'll be able to get inside the other person and feel their feelings and hear their thoughts and understand what they thought of you when this was going on, and you experience their life from their perspective in response to what you did. But absent that, I forgot the question.
No, you didn't. You answered it perfectly. It was just about how we respond to the oneness of I am you and you are me and you are doing something to yourself.
Oh, and a lot of people don't like to hear this when I say it doesn't really matter. The reason why I say it doesn't really matter is there's no judgment in the afterlife.
Right.
You are here to experience what human life is like, and humans are violent, primitive, negative, nasty creatures.
And some of us were set up for catalysts because how do you experience the contrast if somebody doesn't take on the role of doling that out?
Yeah. So, like I say, the consequences are suffered here and in the afterlife, but understanding that what you do to another is you're doing to yourself, I don't think gets people very far. I don't I don't I don't think it's something people can really grasp.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's definitely a tough one. So you also asked several very deep questions when you were in your near-death experience. And one of the ones you said you asked is, what is the one true religion? And I'm sure people would love to hear the answer to that. Will you share what you were given?
There is no true religion, only truth itself. All religions are man-made. They're all primitive. They're all wrong. They're all good faith attempts by primitive people. And I can't overemphasize that primitive idea to understand life and try to find some way to control it. I mean, humans started worshiping the sun and the moon and the ocean and, all kinds of things in an attempt to control their effects on life. So religions are just fantasies about a way to have control over your life, when the real truth is that you can control your life through manifesting.
And that was the last thing I was going to go to. So let's elaborate on that a little bit because, again, you're holding these gold nuggets, Nanci, and people want to really understand. And you also mentioned, the kind of the secret philosophy, which was, I think, off in several ways. So you saw this instant creation through thought when you were not in the human experience. So how have you been able to harness what you understand to navigate this life experience when you came back with manifestation?
Well, I put the principles to work. I also teach them and do coaching. But there are two types of manifesting:
Okay.
conscious and unconscious. The
Okay.
conscious type is what's normally talked about. People want to create a particular thing. They want a red convertible in their driveway, or they want a new job, or they want to find Mr. Right, or whatever it is they want uh, as a human desire. But 99.9% of life is manifested unconsciously. We start creating beliefs about ourselves, about life, and about our place in the life while we're in the uterus. And then when we're little tiny children, and then we continue to create beliefs as we go along. And most of those beliefs are wrong simply because we don't have enough human experience to put them into context. Like, for example, souls can't tell a joke. They can't tell the difference between a joke and fact when they're in human life. Souls don't understand that people say things off the cuff that they don't really mean. So you can be a little child, or even a fetus, or a toddler, and hear your parents say something like, man, we really couldn't afford to have that baby. And you can spend the rest of your life believing they don't want you. They don't love you. You're a burden. You're a financial loss. You're a blight on their, just because souls don't have enough experience in human life to understand that people say things they don't really mean, or that they don't mean the way you take them. And an entire lifetime can be spent unconsciously manifesting the events, the circumstances, and the interactions that prove that erroneous belief, because humans refuse to be wrong. And, I refuse to be wrong too. Just like I'm just, in a human body right now. But so many lives go astray because they are following and manifesting harmful or even idiotic beliefs.
And this includes not just things they're saying out loud, but thoughts that they're having too, right? Especially thoughts.
Especially thoughts, especially attitudes, and like I say, it's ways of looking at yourself that are just wrong.
So what's the first thing we can change? I mean, does it come back to like a self-love and understanding and recognizing and looking in the mirror and really starting to believe that we love ourselves, like that, almost getting back to taking care of your body? Like, where do people start with this?
I there got to be a lot more techniques, but I learned 4 techniques while I was in the afterlife. Um, when I was given this huge download of understanding and knowings about manifesting. Um, one is to bring the belief to light, expose it to the light of day. You know, you have to recognize it, and that may take therapy or some good friend who's able to talk you through, well, how did you get to that belief? I mean, like you may be 45 years old and think that you're not successful when you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and you have to have a friend or somebody who cares enough about you to do it, to walk you back in time to where did you get this crazy idea that you're not successful? What happened in your life? So then you expose that erroneous belief to the light of day. And sometimes that's enough to be able to look at it from an adult perspective, like to, to be able to look at the fact that your parents said something and it was a joke. And once you realize that, then the belief is gone. You could also have new experiences to change your belief. And you may have to craft specific experiences, and go and do them in order to see that there's a different way of looking at things, to give yourself a different perspective. Another way is to go back through your memory and your database of not your own human experiences and see that you've been trying to prove something that's not true. Like when people tell me that they feel like they're a failure or a success, or they don't know what they're doing, or they're whatever, I tell them to go back and write down every single thing they've succeeded at, including got myself out of diapers, learned how to go to the potty, learned how to feed myself, all the way back as far as you can go. You got gold stars on my papers in first grade, every single success. And then look at those in context, because humans have a way of looking at the 2% of life that's negative or harmful or unhappy, and not the 98% that was good and successful. And the fourth way is to re-educate yourself. I mean, like I know people who have hung on to medical diagnoses for most of their lifetime that are just wrong. And that's because they were misdiagnosed at some point in their life, or they created an identity of being their diagnosis. And I'll give you an example. I was diagnosed as an asthmatic when I was in like my 20s. I went through all these drugs trying to control my asthma, and it was just a horrific experience with the drugs. And there's a misdiagnosis of a vocal cord disorder. But it wasn't until I got that correct diagnosis and the doctor was able to convince me that it was the correct diagnosis that I stopped having asthma attacks.
Because everything is so mental. This is why pharmaceuticals have to overcome the placebo effect in order to get a drug to market, because our minds are that powerful.
Yeah, and if you have a belief that, you're handicapped in some way, you will be handicapped in some way because you manifest your life to match that belief.
Yeah. Nanci, wow. Wow, wow. I seriously could sit here and talk to you for probably another 3 or 4 hours about all of this, because I feel like, only scratched the surface of all of the wisdom that you experienced on the other side. And that was just one of your NDEs. So I would love to hear from the audience right now. What about Nanci's NDE really touched you? Did you guys get to hear something that you haven't ever heard before? And even if you don't have a comment to make about her NDE, I'd love it if you just wrote collective, waking up the collective, because all those things help. But I would imagine right now there are A lot of people who would love to connect with you since you do this coaching and you can help people. And I love that you had real practical things that people could do that made a lot of sense. And you have your book. So share with everybody how they can find you and work with you.
Oh, well, I got a YouTube channel, and a website,
What's the name of your YouTube channel?
author Nanci Danison.
It's
C,
Nancy with an I.
yeah, NANCIDANISON, and that's my website too.
Okay.
NANCIDANISON.com. Like my books are on Amazon. If you Google my name, you'll find a bazillion entries.
Wonderful. All right. Normally, I only ask one question at the end, but today I'm going to ask you two. I, as a fellow chocolate lover, must know what is your favorite chocolate?
Oh my God, I am addicted to mocha almond fudge, non-dairy ice cream. So it's, mocha, which is the coffee, and then chocolate, and then the little sliver of almonds. And I could eat that 24 hours a day.
I love it. I love chocolate so much. It is just such a big part of my earth experience. And I really think it would be one of the biggest things I would miss when I leave here.
One of the 33 souls says that there are souls who incarnate into a human just for cake.
I believe it. Let's eat
I believe
cake.
that too.
I love it. Okay, so I really do ask one question at the end of these interviews to everybody, and that is, Nancy, what do you know for sure?
I know for sure. I'm source.
It's the mic drop. I knew that was what you were going to say too, which I love. Wow, Nancy, this conversation has exceeded my expectations. I loved it so, so, so much. And I have to thank you. Thank you, Nancy, for your willingness to come back and to share your experiences, a very deep, profound experience. And I I love what you are doing. Thank you so much for what you are doing personally to help wake up the collective. It is so needed right now.
And thank you for what you're doing, Lori. I mean, I cannot overemphasize how wonderful your work is and how needed and valuable it is.
You're gonna make me cry. Thank you so much. And of course, this show is absolutely nothing without all of you who tune in to watch, to listen, and to share these beautiful experiences with somebody who needs them. And if you still have questions, you can join me for Wake Up Wednesdays live at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Do you believe that love never dies and you want to hear stories that prove it? Well, hit the subscribe button. You belong here.